promote your pawn on the first move of a chess game, just switch it with your opponent's pawns and capture whichever piece you want. Nope, just kidding. What I really mean by promoting your pawns is maximizing their strength. Out of the 32 pieces on a chessboard, half of them are pawns. And in the world of chess, good pawn play can work wonders. Seriously, it's like creating magic on the board. This is also true in Chess 960. Welcome back to my Chess 960 tutorials. Today, I'm going to walk you through a complete guide on how to master pawn play in Chess 960. And guess what? We'll touch on classical chess too. But wait, there's more. Stick with me to the end, and I'll make a grand announcement that could be your best chance yet to learn Chess 960. So, buckle up, and let's dive into the magic of pawns. Today, we'll cover common pawn formations, weak pawns, and the purpose behind all this pawn play. After you check out my key insights and follow the examples I've provided, go ahead and practice what you've learned. Watch your pawn skills improve. I promise you'll see the magic happen. Now, let's talk about 4 key pawn formations in Chess 960. Head-to-head pawns, pawn chains, flank pawn advancements, and the pawn center. First up, let's look at position 123. White starts with c4, and black responds. On the second move, white creates a pawn chain. A pawn chain grabs space, stabilizes your structure, and limits your opponent's options. Keep in mind that you can either trade off the pawn at the front of the chain or attack the middle or back of the chain to weaken your opponent's setup. So, on move 3, white plays b4, and we have what I call head-to-head pawns. In situations like these, your best option is to create a pawn break, just like with b4. This puts pressure on c5 and opens up more possibilities for white. After the exchange, black grabs the unprotected pawn on h2, a classic pawn sacrifice. But with g3 and bg2, white gains 2 tempos and opens the h-file for the rook. This is the compensation for the sacrifice. Next, let's take a look at flank pawn advancements. Modern engines often enjoy pushing flank pawns in classical chess. As intermediate players, we sometimes struggle to grasp the deeper ideas behind these pawn pushes, but they generally serve to restrict your opponent's forces and can even create weaknesses. Let's check out position 134. Here, the engine plays h4 on move 2. In Chess 960, the special positioning of the pieces gives us even more options to push h4 or a 4 early. Backed by the rook, possibly the bishop and the queen, this pawn is much safer than in classical setups. If your opponent plays h4, don't hesitate. Respond with h5. In this example, black ignores the pawn and continues with normal play, which is a bit dubious. As you can see, after h5 and h6, black's kingside setup is a little awkward. The bishop can't move because it has to protect g7, and pushing or taking with the g-pawn would weaken black's structure. Sure, black has a lead in development, but the long-term issues are even worse. Let's fast forward to position 407, move 9. Here, black plays the interesting f6 to support e5. Then, bf5 and nf7 come in to reinforce this idea. Eventually, black gets 2 strong pawns in the center. If white strikes back immediately, they're fine, but the temporary pawn sacrifice isn't so easy to deal with. If white plays a bit more passively, the power of black's pawns in the center comes to life, and white feels a lot of pressure on the king side. Fun fact, the direction your pawn chain is pointing often indicates the side you'll be attacking. Now, let's shift gears and talk about weak pawns. In any chess game, you should aim to keep your pawn structure intact and provoke weaknesses in your opponent's position. You want to look out for weak pawns, doubled pawns, isolated pawns, backward pawns, and sometimes hanging pawns. For example, in position 15, white creates a pawn chain from a 2 to c4, provoking black to play d5, which creates a backward pawn on a 7 and gives white a strong square at e5. After move 11, black's pawn structure is already looking bad, even though Stockfish only gives a 0.3 advantage to black. So, I decided to play from black's side and see how Stockfish 17 beats me. You might be surprised, but I managed to play like 10 top engine moves and held my position pretty well. But you can see the problem. My pawns were scattered, and my pieces were stuck. All of that came from pawn play, which shows just how crucial this video is. Of course, after a few more moves, my position collapsed, and I resigned. But hey, it was a learning experience. Weak pawns aren't that hard to understand. You just have to recognize them and keep putting pressure on them. Simple, right? Now, let's think. What do you think are the purposes of pawn play? I personally believe in these 4 key ideas. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Okay, the moment you've all been waiting for, my grand announcement. Here it is. This document shows my outline for the Chess 960 tutorial series. Over the next few months, I'll be covering all 3 phases of the game in great detail. And at the end of the series, I'll be streaming live for the very first time, if, of course, you guys support me. During the stream, you'll be able to submit your games for analysis, and I'll even play some games live. Plus, there will be opportunities to ask questions. So, if you're serious about learning Chess 960, this is your golden opportunity. Don't wait. Click that glowing red button down below to follow me and start improving your chess today.